The site that we have here, we have a lot of different types of mounds. Now the ones that we're going to see over here, of course, is going to be the Great Temple Mound, which is our tallest. It's about 55 feet high, and at the base it's about the size of a football field. We believe that that's where the chief would have had their home on top of. They would have had several smaller ceremonies up there as well. And then also, just can't really see it because of the way the berm is here, but the little mound that you see at the top right there is the Lesser Temple Mound. It is where we believe the second chief would have had their home on top of. Mound that we drove past as we were coming into the second gate, that was the funeral mound. As the name suggests, it's the burial mound. That's where they would have placed more of the elite members as they had passed on with some ceremonial objects. The story of the park starts with devastation but ends with preservation. Before this was a federally recognized site, it had been destroyed a couple times with a train track. The original railroad cut is actually what is the park road here today that we were just driving on. And you can actually see, of course, how close it gets to the Lesser Temple Mound. It actually destroyed about 2/3 of that. And it also did cut into about 2/3 of the funeral mound. Now, when that was happening, in the funeral mound at least, there were bones literally falling out of the side of it, which is awful. Luckily, though, the people in Macon, they saw what was happening, and they decided that they were going to do something about it. Because they didn't know too much about these mound sites. They just knew that they were here, but they knew they had to be significant if there was things like ceremonial pieces and skeletal remains inside of those. So what they did was they wrote a letter to the Smithsonian, and this is in the 1920s, and they said, we have this site, and we would really like it if you could do an archaeological dig of this area, because there has to be some sort of significance to it. The Smithsonian says, okay, if you acquire this land, we'll be able to do that dig for y'all. That dig takes place from 1933 to 1942, before we get involved with World War II. And during that time, they found 2.5 million artifacts in this area. Some of that stuff is on display in our museum. There's about 2,000 artifacts in the museum. But a lot of those stuff is still being cataloged today by museum techs, archaeologists. They're trying to still identify a lot of those little bits and pieces of things. Of course, some of the stuff that they found during that time is going to be funerary objects as well. But luckily, times have changed since they were originally found, but we've been able to place a lot of those items back where they belong, to be with the people that they were buried with.